Okay, so today we're going to be continuing further into the chapter of the economics of inequality and poverty. Last time we left off we're covering the Lawrence curve and its construction. Today we're going to dive a little deeper into poverty, what it means exactly, how we're going to measure it, some difficulties in measuring it, and as well as the causes and consequences of both these aspects, economic inequality and poverty. All right. So the first thing we need to know about poverty are these two aspects we can divide it into. So the first one is absolute poverty. Now, absolute poverty, it's the most face value definition of poverty where someone does not have the minimum amount that they need for survival. So something, uh, for example, the UN defines this as anyone who earns below USD 1.9 per day. Now, this is the widely accepted definition, and what this basically means is that anyone in the entire world, if they earn below 1.9 US dollars per day, they're considered absolutely poor in that they cannot support their most basic needs of food and shelter and other aspects. In contrast, relative poverty is much different. The keyword here is obviously relative. The broad idea is that a person who's unable to actively participate in society is considered relatively poor. So again, here we take society into context. Here, there really isn't any context. It's just that one international poverty line, which is USD 1.9. However, here we have to take the context of the society into account. So, for example, if you're earning 10,000 USD in the USA, you would be considered deeply relatively poor. Whereas if you're earning 10K USD maybe in a poor African country, then you would not be considered relatively poor. Um, there are two main ways to measure relative poverty. The first one being median income benchmarks. So this can again change from whoever you ask to define it, and different countries may have different measurements for this. But just to give an example, um, one measurement states that anyone earning less than 50% of the median wage. So let's say a country, one second, let's say the median wage in a country is about 50,000. Anyone that earns less than 25K is considered relatively poor by the definition of median income benchmarks. So what this means is that anyone who's earning below this amount, provided that the median income in that country is 50K, is considered relatively poor, meaning that they cannot actively participate in society and support all of their needs. Another way that we're required to know as part of the syllabus to measure relative poverty is minimum income standards. So the best way to look at it is through this example. Basically, in this method, economists divide society into various different groups, and through data and statistics, they analyze their average weekly spendings, and based on that, they come up with a minimum income standard. So, for example, here you can see the MIS for one adult and one small child in the UK in 2020. So, this is the money flowing out of uh, their account. So, for example, the typical one adult, one small child household in the UK in 2020 would spend 58 euros on food, 5 on alcohol, etc. And they would earn pre-tax 789 euros. So you get the gist. Basically, this is another more accurate and more precise way of defining relative poverty. But again, this is obviously much more expensive to carry out these frequent data collections and what exactly these categories should be as consumer spending keeps changing, whereas median income just simply defines it as less than 50% of the median income of a country. So those are the two main ways that we can measure relative poverty. So these two aspects, what we just discussed, international poverty line, median income, and minimum income standards, these are called single indicators, meaning that they only cater to one aspect, which in this case is all income. They only cater to income to define poverty. Whereas we don't know, there might be other ways that poverty might be persistent. So, one way we can tackle the issue of single indicators is through the multidimensional poverty index. So, the multidimensional poverty index is basically a composite indicator, which, as implied by the word composite, takes into account many different single indicators and it comes up with a final score. So, there are three main categories that are targeted by the MPI, which is health, education, and standard of living. So under health, they look at nutrition and child mortality, and they assign a weight of 1/6 of the final score. So this is decided on the final impact that this factor might have on somebody's poverty experience. So, for example, the economists believe that uh, cooking fuel may have a smaller impact on somebody's final poverty than nutrition. So, hence, this is more important, hence, it's given more weight. You don't really need to know this, it's just good to know, and it might help you during a few questions. Similarly, for education, they look at years of schooling and school attendance. And for standard of living, they look at many different factors. All of them might not be listed here as well. What's important here to know is that is these three factors, health, education, and standard of living. It's good if you know these ones as well. For education, it's quite intuitive. You know, how else would you measure education rather than years of schooling or how frequently students go to school? So you don't really need to know these ultra specifics, but it's always better for paper 1 and paper 2 15 markers. As for a few difficulties in measurement, this is again, the syllabus guide hasn't provided specific subpoints for this. So any textbook you use, they might have some contrasting or not contrasting, might have some different view of looking at this aspect. Any view is fine as long as you're able to justify it. So, for example, here are some difficulties that may arise. So, some countries may have varying definitions of poverty. So, we just saw relative poverty. Some countries may define the median income benchmark as less than 60% or 70% or even 40% of the median income. So, here this reduces the comparability between countries and makes a measurement even more difficult. Again, we have a difficulty in data collection. You know, it takes a lot of human resources and capital and money to go into a country and collect all this important data, especially for a composite indicator like MPI, which comprises of so many different factors. Moreover, factors like cooking fuel or electricity or drinking water, these may go beyond just a monetary definition of poverty. So these themselves might have difficulties in quantifying and factoring into the final score. So that's a problem with data collection, which relates to quantification and the resources we need to actually carry it out in the different countries. Another aspect might be war. So obviously, it's going to be difficult to go into a war-torn country and collect data, since people wouldn't be willing to do that. Plus, entry into the country will likely be extremely limited. So due to this, there might be a lack of data on many countries. For example, Syria, which is going through a civil war right now. Another example might be skewed data. So if data relating to poverty or any one of these aspects is requested from a government um, to serve their own national interests or to protect their international image, they might purposefully skew the data, providing inaccuracies, which is again a big difficulty in the measurement of poverty. So these three aspects are the main things we're supposed to know to define poverty. Now we move on to the causes and consequences of inequality and poverty. Inequality was what we looked at in the past video, and poverty is what we just saw. So all these causes may lead to either one of these, or maybe or even both. So the first cause of poverty and inequality, and perhaps the most intuitive and largest cause, is the inequality of opportunity. So this is so we were introduced to the idea of inequality last video, where we saw a difference in income of different income groups and percentiles. However, we're now dealing with an inequality of opportunity, where different people have varying levels of opportunity to actually build or build something for themselves or gain jobs or have some upward mobility. People living in more rural areas don't have as much access to school, or they can't apply for jobs as easier. So there's a lack of opportunities there. So there's a lack of upward mobility for these people as well, which keeps them in a state of poverty and propagates inequality in the country. So that's just one example. You can connect this to many different examples. So that's just an idea of the inequality of opportunity. Another intuitive cause is discrimination, especially in hiring practices. Some employers might have prejudices towards certain groups. Uh, Historically, there have been a lot of prejudices against Africans or African Americans, which has prevented them from uh, getting jobs that would change the lives of their uh, generations. So, another cause of generational poverty and inequality can be discrimination. Um, the third point is varying human capital. The important word here is human. So this basically refers to the skill and ability of a person, which generally relates to, their education or their training, where they went to college, how much education do they have. Okay. So variations in people's income or the existence of poverty might exist because um, people are disproportionately educated, or one part of the society is not given the same opportunity to be trained. Hence, people end up with varying levels of human capital. Obviously, the ones with higher human capital will have a better potential to land higher paying jobs, whereas the ones with lower human capital will not have those opportunities. And this further leads to inequality. The next one is varying resource ownership. So to give an example, maybe some two people are earning the same amount. Let's say they're earning 50,000 per annum, but one of them has been given, they have received some shares or some stocks and bonds after the death of a family member. And so that's a form of resource. So that resource will end up making a lot of money for them over the course of many years, whereas the other person who doesn't have such a resource will be unable to have the same opportunity. Hence, this will lead to a higher level of inequality. Again, this can be connected to various different types of resources. That example I gave was just one example that you can talk about. So these three are a little different from these four causes. So you'll have to keep these in mind as well when you're answering questions. So tax policies basically refer to the legislation and regulation that a government comes up with regarding its capital gains or income or goods and services taxes, etc. We'll look more deeply into taxes in the next section when we look at how we're going to correct poverty. But for now, you just need to know that certain tax policies may affect the lower classes more and the higher classes lesser. Or if there's a proportional tax applied through all the classes, obviously the higher classes, since they have more resources, they'll be able to pay that off with a lesser burden. Hence, it worsens the situation of the lower classes. So we'll look into this a little bit more in detail through some models as well. So the next point is supply side policies. So supply side policies here, I should mention here we're talking only about market based. So this will be explored in much more detail once we come across the chapter dedicated to supply side policies. But for now, you should know that certain policies that the government imposes for the basically to achieve a higher potential output for the economy. So this is going a little bit off track, but if you've seen the LRAS curve, basically supply side policies are aimed at moving this to the right. So increasing the productive capacity of the economy or the potential output. So one way to do that is to reduce incentives for the unemployed or to weaken labor union laws or basically do anything to incentivize people to stop being unemployed, to go out and actively seek more jobs. So a lot of times what this ends up doing is that it instead of actually promoting growth, it just ends up creating more poverty since you're reducing welfare programs and you're cutting spending on the on unemployment checks for people. So this just demotivates them even more and causes a lot of poverty in few cases, and obviously leads to more inequality since those with jobs will be much better off now. Now the next part is globalization. So this is a pretty small point. All you need to know here is that with the advent of globalization, multinational corporations that operate internationally have the option to basically country hop. What that means is that they can go to a cheap labor country and hire a bunch of cheap workers and exploit them, and then this lowers their cost of production by a lot, causing them to rake in huge profits as they sell these products internationally in more expensive markets. So exploitation and low labor jobs created through globalization may lead to more inequality and poverty as well. Next, we come to the consequences of poverty and inequality. One straightforward consequence will be a lower economic growth. If there is poverty or if there's higher inequality, what ends up happening is that overall there is just lesser income. The next part is social stability, lower social stability. So when people see their incomes fall or they see that there isn't a very good job outlook for them, and they tend to look for places to blame or people to blame, and oftentimes they turn towards the government. So there's a lot of uncertainty and social instability at this time. There might be a lot of protests or even talks of overthrowing governments in times like these where there's high poverty and high inequality. And another point which directly relates to this one is a lower standard of living. As poverty increases and as inequality also increases, the average or median or mean income, whatever you want to call it, will go down of the country, which causes there to be a lower standard of living. Basically, the quality of life for everyone falls down. So that is the gist of everything up until the causes and consequences of the inequality of poverty. In the next video, we'll look a little bit deeper into how we can actually solve all of these problems we've highlighted in the past two videos. So some ways of doing this will be tax, and another way will be regulation or market-based approaches. So yeah, that's it for this one.